Seven Kingdoms. There is something you hear quite often nowadays, but back before people started to pretend that they had read the Song of Fire and Ice, Seven Kingdoms meant something else for a small group of people. It was an RTS, a real-time strategy game built in a way that was uncommon at the time. For you see, this was not your garden variety real-time strategy game. This was built in the pre-StarCraft era of RTS games, back before you didn't count your ability to play in APM and there were other means of winning other than just rolling over the enemy and killing everything they have. Seven Kingdoms was the brainchild of a man named Trevor, which you may know as the person that created capitalism, not the socio-ecological, economical, whatchamacallit concept that suffocates humanity today, but the game Capitalism and its sequel, Capitalism 2, and a bunch of other games made by Enlight software. Enlight would of course make other things like a not very memorable Joan of Arc game and the Zoo Empire game, not to be confused with Zoo Tycoon. But their crowning achievements were without a doubt Capitalism and Seven Kingdoms. And this is what we're talking about today. Seven Kingdoms came out of the idea of Trevor to create a game like Civilization, but one that wasn't turn-based. But how exactly do you go about doing that? I mean, even though in Civilization you can spend countless turns just waiting and doing nothing, when you do have to do stuff, you generally do a lot of it. How do you do a lot of stuff in real time without losing track of everything? And you probably guessed by the way that the game on the background looks that this required a sort of tightening of the scope of the game. Unlike Civilization, this didn't take place on what sometimes is an entire planet with multiple continents. This game takes place on a map that, although can be large, is not what you would call gigantic. And although you can have a lot of enemies, you are not usually gonna encounter a dozen of them. A dozen enemy factions, but villages, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of them. You also don't really have much need for a tech tree, although there is one, a very short one, and only for siege equipment and some boats. There's also no discernible effect of the passage of time on your civilization. Vikings will always be Vikings. They'll never learn how to use a toothbrush or refrigeration or the stealth bomber. They'll always be swinging axes at people, but they'll do it better with time. When you start out this game, you are the ruler, the king of your civilization. And that's not actually right, because there are many other representatives of your civilization, many Vikings, many Romans, many Greeks, many other things scattered around the map. But this village you are the king of, you are the supreme leader of this settlement. And its people are yours to do as you will until you piss them off royally and they will just try to murder your ass. They will rebel. Imagine if in StarCraft, if you started botching up your wars, your skirmishes, and you get about 50 Marines killed for nothing, your SCVs go on strike. That wouldn't be a fun game, would it? Well, that wouldn't be StarCraft. But in Seven Kingdoms, things could happen. You could over-recruit people from the village and, you know, the other ones, they wouldn't be happy to see all their comrades, all their friends just vanish, and they'll try to rebel. You had to ease them into it. You had to do everything gradually. You couldn't tax them into oblivion from the get-go. No, you had to wait for them to get used to the idea of them paying through the nose for everything. Or you could have an army, a standing army of loyal people to you that you would keep with your king in the fort to train, to remain loyal, or you could pay them to be loyal, and you could use them to crush a rebellion. They didn't have what you would call a complicated method of handling settlements. It was basically you plump down a fort next to a village. If you have a leader in that fort that is the same civilization as the majority of the people in the village, their resistance to you will go down. Alternatively, you can attack the village with your army and they will surrender to you, and then their loyalty to you will go up depending on the leadership of the guy in the fort. That was one method of conquering villages. You could just then bribe them if you wanted to do it in a more peaceful way, or you could use espionage. espionage. Now, in terms of being an RTS, compared to something like StarCraft or compared to something like even Age of Empires, Seven Kingdoms was simplistic as hell. It had little to no variety in terms of units. You had your civilization, and to be fair, each civilization had different abilities, so they handled differently in combat, and you had a bunch of siege weapons that you could research extremely slowly. And that's it. Combat was not the greatest thing in the game, but it was there, it was functional, it was a method of achieving victory. But not the only one, not the only means. For you see, you weren't out to utterly destroy your opponents. You actually didn't have to kill anyone in this game. It offered you options, the options to win by other means than just military. You could achieve a victory through population, through economy, or through destroying the lairs of evil creatures dwelling in the darkness. I'll get to them soon. And you can achieve these objectives in multiple ways. Or, no, that's incorrect. You could only achieve them in their specific way. If you wanted an economy, you had to make a trade network. You had to build an infrastructure, a simple one at that, of producing goods from resources found on the map. You would have to build a mine on the resource. You would need a village for miners to live in. You would then need a factory that would take the ore from the mine and produce a good. And then a market from which that good will be taken by camel, always by camel, no matter if the map had snow on it or not, always by camel, to another market. Oh sure, your village itself would use that market and generate money, but sending them to the markets of your opponents would also generate money. Although opponent is probably a strong word. Rival, maybe better. Because, like I said, in this game, you didn't have to be hostile towards your opponents, your rivals. You could have alliances with them. You could have treaties of friendship with them. You could have economical and political relations with them and never go to war. You could sell them food if you had the surplus because you had more people not working in factories and working the fields that were not actually visible. They were theoretical in the village somewhere. And if push came to shove, you could party up with them and invade someone else's lands. And I mean, go up next to their village and start hitting it with an axe. Yeah, this game had a strange representation of how sieges work, but it worked. It was a functional representation. It wasn't a one-to-one scale, but then again, neither was Civilization. And one thing this game did better than Civilization, much better, like it did this better than probably most games that I've played, strategy games at least, was the espionage. In this game, you could get a spy, you could hire a spy, either from your own village or get them from an inn, and you could send them off to someone else's village. And EA would do the same. You would often see that a neutral unit has joined your faction. And you would see them come from the middle of nowhere, coming towards your village, and sometimes, yeah, it would be just a neutral unit from a different village joining your faction. But if you took a look at it closely and saw that, wait a minute, isn't it coming from the kingdom of that guy that sort of hates me? Then press delete on the unit because you can delete your own units, and you would see that you just executed an enemy spy, and that was the funniest thing possible. Now the AI itself cannot do that. It cannot delete its own units, so you're sort of at a bit of an advantage here, but not when it comes to defending against them. Because again, being on RTS, you can't look everywhere at the same time. Sometimes one of them will slip in. And if one of them slips in and you don't know where, even though you can see representations of all the civilizations in your villages, you are probably going to lose something. There is a method in winning in this game that is just superb. You can literally get your spy declared king of the opponent kingdom. Or you can just buy out their throne if they have no honor, but the idea goes something like this. You try your best to infiltrate a spy into an enemy village and then hope that your spy is recruited into the fort as a soldier. And if that soldier ever becomes general, they are next in line to become king if the king of the enemy dies. And then let's say something happens to the king, like I don't know, your spy kills him. There's a low chance of being able to do that to a king in assassination mode, but it's a possibility. Or you could just engage them in combat and kill the king outright, though keep in mind your spy will fight against you because he has to keep up appearances. But if you kill the king, king, and your guy is then king, if I remember right, you basically got their kingdom. Now, it's been a couple of years since I implemented that tactic, but that's the kind of thing that amazed me about this game. You could play it on so many layers. It wasn't, yeah, the direct combat was kind of crap, but it had so many layers to it. And espionage was by far one of the greatest. Even if you didn't become king, you could just take your spy general and flip him back to your side. And voila, you would have their fort and everything in it. You could basically cripple them just by planting people in the right positions. It's the kind of espionage system that I wish more games would have, because it lets you do things differently. It's not just about using your spy to spy on people or setting us off the bomb. You can use your spy in more versatile ways. Of course, there is one thing you can do with spies, and that is fight the Fryhtans. The Fryhtans are a race or several races of monsters that are just spread across the land. Now, even though I've owned this game since I was 14, I still have no idea what the backstory is. There are monsters on this land, in this earth, on this planet, in this plane. There's the Rockan, there's the snake people, there's the Druge or whatever the name was. Headless things, things made of rock, things made of icky stuff, and they live in their own lairs, and you have to kill them before they kill you. That is, if you set them to be offensive. If not, they just stand there and may attack you if you attack them. And they have treasure in their lairs, so you can kill them, get their treasure. If the high priest of them, their highest, their chieftain basically, if their chieftain dies, you get access to a scroll, a divine scroll that is the exact same type as the person that killed the Fryhtan chieftain. And by that I mean it belongs to that civilization. So you can build something that is akin to one of the 7 wonders of the world, a temple. A temple that you use to summon your god. You could summon Thor to just wreak havoc with tornadoes and lightning everywhere. You could summon a goddamn dragon to set fire to everything. You could summon some guy riding a shield to promote your generals until, well, not all deities are created equal, and actually summoning one takes a bajillion years. This wasn't what you would call a fast game. Everything related to research or to generating sufficient worship to actually summon a god took forever, which is why I mostly didn't use them, or when I did, I sort of cheated and got every scroll and summoned every deity and just fooled around with them on the map. Now, 7 Kingdoms may not be to everyone's liking. It's not a good game in terms of combat. I mean, sometimes your units just stand back and let the first ones die and then attack. It's not a good game, a complex game I mean, in terms of economy. Although you do have trade, and you can set up some really interesting tidbits with trade, like you can set your marketplace to be between different villages that maybe you don't even own at all, or you can place your factories to be connected to both your village and another village, and you can hire people from that village and maybe convert them that way with jobs to your village. I think it's not a very complicated system were to compare it to something like Europa Universalis, but yeah, compared to Civilization, it's still more complex because you do have to make your marketplace, you have to create your caravans. The politics aspect, the diplomacy aspect, again, isn't all that complicated, but again, neither was Civilizations, and the espionage is actually better. The thing that really drags it down, though, is the lack of any sort of noticeable progress. You don't really change that much, you just research ballistas, Ballista 2, Ballista 3, the fire thrower, a cannon, and that's really it. It didn't really shine in that aspect. But the rest of them, they kind of made up for it. They made an interesting little game made by a few people with some good music. Gotta say, had this before a sound card was something that you could just buy from everywhere, well, at least here, and I played the music of the CD, it was very good. A game that gave me a lot of pleasant memories, mostly involving espionage and trying to just dick with everyone else in the game. And they want to know the good bit? There's actually 2 good bits and a bad bit. One of the good bits is that 7 Kingdoms Ancient Adversaries is open source and free. Enlight software released it to the public. You can either buy it off GOG if you want to. The one on GOG also has cinematics in it, or you can just download it off the internet. There's an official site where you can get the latest build of the game. It's free, it works, even the multiplayer works. It's actually functional today with modern servers. The other good bit, it had a sequel. Seven Kingdoms 2, the Fryhtan Wars. That one even has an HD version released a couple of years ago, and that lets you play even as the Fryhtans, with their own hierarchy, with their own units, with their own stuff. Seven Kingdoms 2 is an improvement over the original in quite a lot of ways. For example, you have actually multiple types of units to command in battle. And then comes the less good part, the bad news, the bad tidbit. It had another sequel called Seven Kingdoms Conquest. It was probably one of the first games I was paid to review. Take everything that was good from Seven Kingdoms, throw it out, and make a not very good Age of Empires 3 clone, or a 3D RTS that sort of looked like Age of Empires. It wasn't a very good game. It was not. And it was sad. Very sad. But hey, at least we have the HD version of Seven Kingdoms 2, which you can find on Steam or GOG, or I believe it's actually available kind of everywhere. Though of course it does cost around $10, but the original Seven Kingdoms Ancient Adversaries is free, so play it. I mean, it's free, you got nothing to lose. And it's a fun, neat little game. Well, it is compared to what games we have now. Back in the day, this thing was amazingly complex. For an RTS, it still kind of is. Oh sure, we got Sins of a Solar Empire that made RTSs everywhere seem small by comparison when it was released, but this was 1997. It was a different time, a simpler time, when something like this was a shining gem, a jewel, an image of a future when real-time strategy could be this complex. And in a way, it sort of was a precursor to the grand strategy, though not really, because it differs from grand strategy in certain terms, but it's sort of similar-ish up to a point. Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process. Or you could consider buying my book called Tale of Doom. Volume 1 is out now and available for just $2. And as always, if you thought it was horrible, you know where to find me and complain about it.